Welcome back to episode 2 of Ramadi Days. The title of this episode is This Ain't SASO Anymore. Now, this is a recollection of my time spent fighting in Ramadi, Iraq as United States Marine Infantryman, part of the 1st Marine Division, Battalion 2-4, Echo Company, 1st Platoon. And we're going to talk about the explosions, the gunfights, and the death that I saw while I was out there to give you an idea what it was like from my viewpoint. A young black man, 19 and 20, in the United States Marine Corps in a combat area. So let's get to it. Now, the name of this episode is This Ain't SASO Anymore. SASO is an acronym for Security and Stability Operations. We were told that we were going there to keep the peace while the new government rebuilt, had elections, and we were to root out insurgents that serve counter to our purpose of SASO. It was a crazy operational schedule when we first got there. This wasn't the initial push of Operation Iraqi Freedom. This was Operation Enduring Freedom, to where Saddam's forces had already been subjugated, and now Marines and other branches were there to maintain the peace while the country rebuilt and America tried to impose democracy, which, if you ask me, never made sense. We're in the cradle of civilization. This is ancient Uruk, where the Epic of Gilgamesh came from. These people had thousands of years of fighting each other. There are tribal divisions that went back before America was even a thought in the founding forefathers' heads. But we thought as Americans that we could impose our Western ideals in this Eastern ancient society. If you ask me, we were doomed from the start. But the one thing about this world is people believe might makes right. And the Bush regime had the might, and they were going to enforce what they considered was right, democracy. So our job was to win hearts and minds, meaning that we were supposed to show the population how great democracy was, what great guys we were. On patrols, we would pass out non-alcoholic beer, which if someone handed me non-alcoholic beer, I'd throw the can at their head. It kind of defeats the purpose. We'd hand out toys, soccer balls to the children, Jolly Ranchers, coloring books, and we were supposed to show them, hey, democracy is great. The population on our patrols used to come out and say, Mr. Saddam bad, America good, Bush good. They would rub their left hand forefinger and right hand forefinger together and say, good, Mr. Good. We had learned basic Arabic. We had learned basic customs. For instance, never show the bottom of your feet. Never put a man on his knees. Never pull out your 9mm if you had one, because that was a weapon of execution. Never touch a female. We learned all the customs because, again, we wanted to show the population that democracy and the American way of living was best for them. Hubris, if you ask me. Sometimes we'd have different platoons in Echo Company patrolling. So when I say platoons, you got to understand a battalion's broken down into companies. And a rifle company, when I served, had 4 platoons. 3 platoons were what they call rifle platoons. And then the 4th platoon would be medium to heavy weapon platoons. So the way we operated is we had 3 platoons running patrols, and our 4th platoon, weapons platoon, was broken up and attached to the other three platoons during their patrols. I was part of first platoon. I think I was in second squad and third squad of first platoon. Might have had a brief stint in first squad, but the dynamics between me and my senior Marines, it didn't lead to me being the best follower. I was, like I said last episode, belligerent. And my junior Marines, DeMarcus Reed, Anthony Soto, Jose Texador, they were belligerent too. We were cut from a similar cloth growing up in the inner city. And we just knew that we weren't going to let what we considered weak men bully or boss us around. So we stuck together pretty tough as my senior Marines tried their best to establish dominance. The one thing they couldn't do was establish dominance because we were ready to fight at the drop of a hat. And all of us were great fighters in our own respect growing up where we grew up. There is a time where when we first got there, the infrastructure was horrendous. Barely had electricity, had no running water. And the combat engineers that were attached onto us did their best to build up the base. And we were also tasked up to reinforce our Humvees and our 7 tons, which were old. To me, it seemed like it was Vietnam era equipment that we had to reinforce with sandbags and plywood because the enemy's weapon of choice was what was called IEDs, improvised explosive devices. So getting to combat outposts, we felt like our higher ups must have messed up because it felt like a punishment being on combat outposts. There were other firm bases that other companies got, like Hurricane Point, Snake Pit, Junction City, that had what we thought were creature comforts. Junction City had a postal exchange where you could buy all of the candy, magazines. They had running phones, they had electricity, they had showers, they had a chow hall where people served wonderful cooked food. But over at Combat Outpost, we had MREs to eat. And if we were lucky enough, we would have a convoy deliver cooked food from the other firm base like Junction City and bring it to us so we could have warm food. Nothing to write home about. We had different types of jobs while we were out there in the first 2 months. Definitely patrolling, showing our face, being nice to the population, conducting those SASO operations. Some platoons in Echo Company would be what's called QRF, Quick Reaction Force. If anything happened out in town, Quick Reaction Force, within a few minutes notice, would be out in town to reinforce the platoon that was patrolling. And then we had regular base guard, as well as personnel other than grunt, like the cooks. So in the first few months, I was attached out when I wasn't patrolling. I was attached out to help the cooks. They called it chow hall duty. Sometimes I'd be on QRF, sometimes I'd be patrolling, sometimes I'd be on security. And I was a junior Marine, but I also had junior Marines. And 2 junior Marines in particular that I remember were Carroll, PFC Carroll, and PFC Robbins. So I said in the last episode, when we got out there, the operational pace was crazy. We would patrol, we would get back, and we'd either be put on camp guard or we'd go and reinforce the chow hall while another platoon was put on quick reaction force. But because we kept on finding so many improvised explosive devices or what might be IEDs in the road, QRF would constantly get stood up, and then whatever platoon was on chow hall duty or being tasked out for any other job would have to be on QRF. And that messed with our sleep schedule. Our bodies were preparing to get rest. Sometimes we patrol 6 hours. Sometimes a 6-hour patrol would turn into an 8-hour patrol. And when your body is planning on getting sleep and doesn't get it, it makes you even more tired. Unlike the first push, from what I understood, the first push, if the Marines knew they weren't getting any sleep, they're able to operate better. So the first casualty that I remember suffering out there came from my platoon, and it came by way of an IED. So I remember being tasked out to the chow hall, and in the morning time, the rest of the platoon was leaving to go out into the city, and everyone was just tired. And I remember PFC Robin saying, I wish I could get blown up so I could get some sleep. In my mind, I was just thinking, oh, what a wimp. Robbins was a skinny guy, and we used to call him Christopher Robbins from Winnie the Pooh because he wasn't the toughest, most intimidating looking Marine. So they went out in town for their patrol or for whatever mission they had to run. And a few moments later, there was a IED attack, and Robbins and Carroll were hitting the attack. Carroll lost his leg and fingers, and Robbins had his arm injured from the improvised explosive device. And I just remember thinking, damn, this is real. This ain't SASO. The people, they hate us. They don't want us here. They're not giving us the information that we need, and we're getting hit. There were two things that I did not like that the enemy used in Iraq. The first was mortar attacks, and the second were IEDs. My buddy DeMarcus Reed used to always say, I can get in a gunfight, I can get in a regular fight, but you can't fight an IED, which is true. An IED can be detonated from a safe distance away. As service members are patrolling, a lookout can call in to the person with the detonator device, and the person with the detonator device can detonate the IEDs. They used to hide IEDs in garbage, in animal carcasses, in vehicles. And so it was the weapon they used the most to kill service members. And then mortars. We receive constant mortar attacks. If you've never been through a mortar attack, it shakes the whole area around you. Some mortars hit the ground and explode. Some mortars explode right before they hit the ground. But remember sustaining mortar attacks and coming out of our squad bay and seeing holes in the ground from the mortar attacks. Now, what used to piss me off the most about mortar attacks wasn't so much the attacks, but it was our idiot platoon sergeant, Jeffrey Craig, that loved to play boot camp games and play with the lives of the Marines that were held under his charge. Jeffrey Craig was a drill master. He trained recruits, and he took the mentality of recruit training, he brought it to combat, and he treated us like we were recruits. This man, before we got back to combat outpost, our firm base, he would pull us off of the Humvees or the 7 tons we're in, and he would have us make what's called a school circle so he could pass us word. This man would patrol us in formation from our squad bay to the chow hall moments after getting mortared because he loved to be hated and he thought he was still in boot camp. So we hated him, and that's what made me hate the mortars. Because if we're marching in formation and we get mortared, you're sacrificing the lives of everybody in that formation. What I hated about IEDs is it was luck of the draw. There'd be IEDs that I walked past and someone else would get hit with. So you really can't plan to fight an IED. So after Robbins and Carroll got hit, my mindset locked in. I said, damn, you could lose your life at any second. So I cherished every second that I lived. And when you hear Marines or combat veterans talk about combat with a sense of fondness, it's because of that sense of mental clarity. I truly lived 100%, not taking anything for granted because I knew that every second mattered. It's the clearest mindset I've ever operated in my life. Getting back to Iraq though, we had known that we were going to need more than just our Vietnam era 7 tons and Humvees and sandbags and plywood. And we started advocating for better material. We didn't get it for a while. And we had to reinforce, we had to dig sandbags to protect us from the mortars. We had to dig sandbags to put on the 7 tons and Humvees. We had to put plywoods on the 7 tons and Humvees. And me being a belligerent bastard, which is a subset of magnificent bastards, and living every second and cherishing every second, I didn't take no shit from nobody, and neither did my 3 friends, DeMarcus, Reed, Anthony Soto, and Jose Texador. One night, as we were filling sandbags, there was a senior Marine named Castillo that tried to rough up Jose Texador, and we had made a pact that no one was going to mess with us. And so a huge shove and match and altercation started, to which our gunnery sergeant had to respond to. And I remember he was asking me what the hell was wrong with me. And again, I told him, hey, we're men just like them. We're risking our life just like them. We're not going to let nobody try to bully us or try to sun us on anything. I remember Gunny Coleman looking at me and saying, well, all right. He could tell that I meant what I said, and I was willing to die as a man instead of live as an ass kisser or a bootlicker. So after Robbins and Carroll got hit, we upped our operational pace to where we were looking for people that were putting IEDs along what was called MSR Michigan, Main Supply Route Michigan. MSR Michigan was a main supply route that service members used to carry supplies from one firm base to another firm base. And it's also what the insurgents targeted so that they could blow us up. So being a Marine was pretty cool. When I tell people about it, I say it's like being a ninja. There's really no other way to explain it. Being an infantry Marine's like being a ninja. We trained so much that we were able to sneak up on enemies and see what they were doing without them even knowing we were there. When my platoon, my squad, my fire team went out on patrols, if we had to even cross the street from our firm base, we'd make sure that we traveled all around and then snuck up to our listening post and observational post so that the enemy would not know we were there. The first official gunfight I'd ever been in happened just like that. Our platoon was tasked with setting up a listening post, observation post along Main Supply Route, Michigan, to catch insurgents putting IEDs along the Main Supply Route. My fire team leader at the time was Lopez. Lopez was born in Mexico. He was an immigrant. He was a great leader. He was a man's man, but he didn't speak English the best. Lopez spoke 3 languages, Spanish, French, and English. And it was a toss-up between English and French to see which was his worst language. One night, we were alongside Main Supply, MSR, Michigan, covered in dirt and trash, watching the road. This had to be around 10, 11 at night, watching the road to see if anybody was placing improvised explosive devices along the road. Through my night vision goggles, I saw a man digging up, breaking up the concrete, stuffing wire and other equipment into the concrete. And that's when I told Lopez, hey Lopez, I see a guy digging in the road. He's putting wire in there and it looks like he's putting explosive in there. Now, this is in the middle of a highway. There's no dirt around. It's concrete. So you're not doing gardening. You're not doing anything nefarious. And again, I saw the wires and I saw the bomb material through my night vision goggles that he was placing in the road. This guy did not know that we were right there watching everything he was doing. So at the time, our fire team leaders were the only ones that had what was called PRR headsets to communicate with the platoon sergeant and the platoon commander. So Lopez, in his thick Spanish accent, started communicating with Lieutenant Valdez. And this is how it sounded because Lopez was a couple of feet away from me. He said, sir, dear Deacon, sir. Lieutenant Valdez is all like, what? Sir, dear Deacon, I got one of them Deacon, sir. Lieutenant Valdez was supposed to be Mexican, but he was one of those whitewashed Mexicans. He only used the accent whenever he was saying a Mexican last name or a Spanish last name. Like he would say, today we're going to go on a patrol and Corporal Bron and Corporal Hernandez. That's the only time he'd use a Hispanic accent. And he could not understand for the life of him what Lopez was trying to say. Lopez got so frustrated, he said, man, fuck, I can't say nothing, man. You take the shit. So he took off his headset and he gave it to me, and I started telling Lieutenant Valdez, I see one man in the middle of the road breaking up the concrete, shoving wire into the concrete, and what seems to be bomb-making material inside the concrete. So just like we had practiced, we were able to chase the man off of MSR Michigan into another squad that was across the street waiting to intercept him. When the insurgent started running, he had a buddy that was also with him, and we chased him. The other squad intercepted him, and he had a weapon with him, and so the other squad shot him in the leg as he drew his weapon. We were able to collect him, and my fire team was charged with security along the alleyway that his friend escaped down. This alleyway was called Gibson. It ran perpendicular to MSR Michigan and also intersected another infamous street called Nova. Gibson and Nova, there were a lot of gunfights, there were a lot of improvised explosive devices, there were a lot of explosions, and more on that in further episodes. But my fire team was pushed out towards the furthest part of the alleyway. At the time, I was carrying an M249 squad automatic weapon, which was a belt-fed weapon. I carried about 600 rounds of ammunition in 3 drums. Jose Texador was in my fire team also. Our fire team leader was Lopez. I forgot the 4th person in our fire team. As my platoon was collecting the insurgent to put on the 7-ton to take back to combat outpost, I heard a car door slam shut towards the Nova area of Gibson, and I heard an engine rev up like the car was gonna run over my fire team. According to rules of engagement, we had to shout, show, shoot. That was our escalation of force if we believed our life was in danger. So in this dimly lit alleyway, I see a car speeding towards my fire team. I'm laying in the prone at the time, and all I'm thinking is this guy's going to run us over, or he could come over here and shoot us. So I stood up in the middle of the alleyway, and I yelled in Arabic, Kif, which means stop. And then I held up my weapon because the vehicle didn't stop. And in Arabic, I said, Kif wahil mek Arabic, which means stop, or else I'll shoot. The car didn't stop. I showed my weapon. As it was getting closer, I fired my weapon, to which Texador fired his weapon too to slow down the car. The bullets impacted the vehicle on the windshield. It was a white, circa 1980s sedan, and the vehicle slowed down, reversed a little bit, and then stopped. And that's the first time I ever killed anybody. Now, I never felt bad about opening fire. Only thing I felt bad about is that we didn't come to closure by getting the body out of the car and reporting to his family what we had done. And that messed with me for a while because our standard operating procedure was to do that. But we just left the dead body there and we went back to the firm base. And the reason that bothered me is I'm somebody's son. I'm somebody's brother. I'm a family member. And if that happened to me, I can only imagine the type of sadness my family would feel not knowing what happened to me. That messed with me for a long time. That's the only regret that I had about Iraq. So we get back to the to the firm base, my lieutenant asked me, he's like, "Why'd you shoot?" I said, "Hey, the guy was going to run us over. I showed shoot because we ran rules of engagement all the time scenarios. So I knew I was in my right." And got back to the firm base, passed on the insurgent that was putting bomb making material in the road to our higher ups. And Al Jazeera television at the time said that United States Marine had shot an innocent man that was doing nighttime gardening. And that's when I decided never to trust Al Jazeera, because there's no gardening going on in the middle of concrete in the middle of a main supply route. So that's when I knew that it was no longer security and stability operations. We were there to actually fight. Insurgents were there to actually fight us and take our lives. So that's it as far as episode 2. Again, recollection of Theophilus Tor, an infantryman in the United States Marine Corps, 1st Marine Division, 2nd Marine, 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines, Echo Company, 1st Platoon. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Go ahead and leave comments, follow, share, and I'll see you again in episode 3.